June 6th, 1944, D-Day. It's a date everyone knows, right? A truly pivotal moment in World War II, the start of the Allied push to liberate Western Europe.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just about maps and generals. It was this whirlwind of individual moments for soldiers on both sides.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we want to get beyond just the standard overview. We're digging into the events of that day using a detailed historical summary, but we're pairing it with some incredible, very raw firsthand accounts from German soldiers who were defending Omaha Beach.
Right. Because we often hear about D-Day from the Allied side, the planning, the bravery, the success, which is all true, of course.
Of course.
But to really grasp the sheer scale, the impact of it, you need to understand what it felt like for the soldiers on the receiving end of that massive invasion force.
So that's our goal here. Connect the big strategic picture with what was actually happening moment by moment for the people on the beaches.
Precisely. Let's try and piece that together.
Okay, so let's set the scene first. Strategically, there was this huge need for a second front in Europe. The Soviets were pushing hard for it, carrying so much of the fight on the Eastern Front.
Immense pressure, yes. And the Allies had been active, obviously, but earlier operations were in the Mediterranean, North Africa, Sicily, Italy.
Necessary steps.
Oh, vital for gaining experience, weakening the Axis. But by 1943, with the Soviets advancing, the call for a direct invasion of Western Europe became, well, undeniable.
So the decision's made for a cross-channel invasion. But where? That must have been a massive question, Brittany. Khotan Peninsula.
They were looked at, definitely, but there were concerns about the geography, about potentially getting Allied forces kind of penned in, isolated.
And then there's the Pas-de-Calais. Closest point to Britain, heavily fortified. Seems logical, maybe?
From the German perspective, yes, very logical, and that's exactly what the Allies counted on, but they chose Normandy instead.
Why Normandy, then? What was the advantage?
Well, several things. Normandy offered a much broader front, which was key. It allowed threats towards Cherbourg, ports further west in Brittany, and, importantly, multiple routes inland towards Paris.
But it lacked a major port initially.
It did, which is where the ingenuity came in the plan for the Mulberry Harbors,
Right.
those artificial ports. A brilliant solution. Plus, Calais, despite its defenses, was actually quite restrictive for a large-scale breakout inland.
Okay, so they choose Normandy, but they need the Germans to keep thinking it's Calais. Enter Operation Bodyguard. This sounds amazing.
It really was a masterpiece of deception. You had Fortitude North making noise about a potential Norway invasion with fake radio traffic.
Okay.
But the real focus was Fortitude South. Convincing the Germans the main landing was coming at Calais, they invented an entire army group, the first U.S. Army group.
Under Patton, no less.
Under Patton, complete with fake radio chatter from Kent suggesting this massive buildup, even dropping dummy paratroopers, all pointing towards Calais.
Incredible. So the Germans are looking the wrong way. And then there's the weather. It nearly didn't happen on June 6th, did it?
It was incredibly touch and go. The plan needed specific conditions, moon, tides, time of day. June 5th was the target, but the weather was just awful.
So Eisenhower had this huge decision to make.
A monumental one. Postponing could mean weeks of delay. But Group Captain Stagg and his meteorological team saw this very narrow window of improvement for the 6th. Eisenhower, well, he rolled the dice.
And crucially, the Germans didn't have the same quality of weather intel.
Not even close. Their forecasts predicted continued storms. That lack of good information meant many commanders were complacent, some were away from their posts. Rommel himself was back in Germany for his wife's birthday.
Wow. Talk about a critical moment. Okay, let's look at the forces involved. This wasn't just the U.S. and U.K.
No, far from it. It was a huge coalition. UK, US, Canada, France, Australia, Czechoslovakia, Poland, the Netherlands, Norway, New Zealand, Greece, South Africa, Southern Rhodesia. A truly international force under commanders like Eisenhower, Montgomery, Bradley, Dempsey.
And on the German side.
You had von Rundstedt as the overall commander-in-chief west, then Rommel leading Army Group B, which covered the invasion front, and Dolman commanding the 7th Army in Normandy itself.
But these German units in Normandy, they weren't necessarily their elite troops, were they? The sources mentioned transfers to the Eastern Front.
That's a really important point. The fighting in the east had bled the German army significantly, so the troops in Normandy were often older or comprised these Ostlegionen conscripts from occupied eastern territory.
And their equipment wasn't always top-notch either.
Often not. Captured weapons, less reliable gear, and crucially, many static units lacked motorized transport. They couldn't react quickly. Now, Utah Beach faced the 7th or 9th Static Division, which had many non-Germans. Omaha, though, That was different.
Ah, yes, Omaha had the 352nd Infantry Division.
Exactly. A full-strength, experienced division that Rommel had moved into that sector. Much more formidable.
And there was this big disagreement in the German command about where to put their tanks, their Panzer reserves.
Yes, a fundamental split. Rommel was convinced, probably rightly given Allied air power, that they had to hit the invasion on the beaches. Stop it before it could establish. So he wanted the panzers close to the coast.
Oh, but others disagreed.
Rundstedt and Gerd von Schweppenberg, who commanded the panzer group, favored the traditional doctrine. Keep the armor back, let the Allies land, figure out the main thrust, and then hit them with a concentrated counterattack.
So who decided?
Ultimately, Hitler intervened, and his decision was sort of a messy compromise. Some panzers were released to Rommel near the coast, others stayed inland under Gere, and the really elite divisions were kept even further back under Hitler's direct control.
Which sounds like it would cause delays.
Huge delays. That divided command, needing permission to move those key reserves, it proved disastrous for the Germans on the day.
Okay, so the deceptions are working, the weather gamble is on, the forces are mismatched in some ways, but dug in. Let's get to the invasion itself. June 6th. Operation Neptune, the landing phase of the larger Operation Overlord. It starts with this massive bombardment.
It does. Huge aerial and naval bombardment meant to pulverize the coastal defenses. But crucially, at Omaha Beach, it didn't really work as planned.
Why not?
Low cloud cover was a major issue. Pilots were also worried about hitting their own landing craft coming in behind the bombs, so they delayed release. The result was many bombs fell too far inland, missing the bunkers and strong points on the coast.
So the defenses at Omaha were largely intact when the troops hit the beach.
Tragically, yes. And then you had the airborne drops happening just before dawn.
Right, the American 82nd and 101st Airborne west of Utah Beach and the British 6th Airborne on the eastern flank near Canaan. Critical missions.
Absolutely vital. The Americans needed to secure the causeways and bridges behind Utah, control the exits from the flooded areas. Their drops were badly scattered due to navigation issues and flak, which caused chaos.
But maybe chaos for the Germans, too?
Definitely. It disrupted their response, tied down troops, and Sainte-Marie-Glisse became the first town liberated.
And the British.
They had equally critical tasks, capturing the Caen Canal and Orne River bridges, Pegasus and Horsa Bridge, famously destroying bridges further east over the Dives River, and taking out the Merville gun battery, which threatened Sword Beach.
Did they succeed?
They did, remarkably, despite also suffering from scattered drops and tough fighting, especially at Merville. Those glider assaults on the bridges were incredibly daring.
And then, around 6:30 a.m., the main landings begin. Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, Sword. 5 beaches, 5 very different stories unfolding.
Radically different.
Especially Omaha.
Let's focus there, because the German accounts we have really bring that beach to life in a horrifying way. The overview calls it the most heavily defended.
It absolutely was. Facing that tough 352nd Division, the German soldiers writing these accounts, Severlo, Gockel, Winter, they weren't raw recruits. They talk about being veterans, knowing their positions.
And the firepower they describe. MG-42s, mortars, artillery. Yes, the MG-42, Hitler's buzzsaw, they called it. Incredibly high rate of fire. Severlo's account from his position, Widerstands Nest 62, overlooking the main landing sector, is just brutal.
He describes seeing the ships appear, the bombing, and then opening fire with that machine gun, the sheer volume of fire.
And the carnage. He talks about the water turning red. It's a chilling perspective on what the Americans were running into, just waves of men hitting this wall of fire.
Gockel, in his foxhole, describes the ground shaking, being blinded by smoke and dust, just trying to survive as more and more Allied soldiers kept coming ashore.
It gives you that sense of overwhelming numbers facing them, even from within their prepared defenses. The sheer scale of the Allied assault was something they hadn't anticipated, despite the fortifications.
And Winter, from his bunker slightly inland, talks about the naval gunfire, feeling the shock waves. He saw a Sherman tank reach the dunes, something they thought impossible, and the loss of his adjutant. It captures the chaos and the unexpected breakthroughs.
These accounts really paint a picture of that death zone Omaha became. Mines, obstacles, Rommel's asparagus, and those metal hedgehogs, all designed to trap and kill on the beach itself.
And the ineffective bombardment meant those defenses were still deadly.
Exactly. Which led to those horrific initial Allied casualties. The breakthrough, when it finally came, was piecemeal. Small groups getting through, intense naval gunfire support finally starting to knock out some German positions.
And ironically, the Germans running out of ammunition in key spots, Severlo and Gockel both mention having to basically abandon their posts because they had nothing left to shoot.
Yes, that exhaustion of supplies under relentless pressure was also a factor, a grim testament to the intensity of the fighting.
Such a stark contrast to Utah Beach further west. The landings there went ashore further south than planned, but hit lighter defenses, lower casualties.
Right, and Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr.'s presence and decisive leadership on the beach there certainly helped. We'll start the war from right here.
And Point du Hoc, the Rangers scaling those cliffs.
An incredible feat of arms, climbing under fire, only to find the main guns had been moved inland. But they found them, disabled them. Heroic, costly fighting.
What about the British and Canadian beaches? Gold, Juno, Sword.
They all faced tough resistance, too. Gold had strong points like the Longues-sur-Mer battery. Juno was tough for the Canadians. The landing was delayed, concentrating troops hitting well-defended towns, leading to high initial casualties.
Sword had tanks that could swim. The DG tanks.
Yes, the duplex-drive Shermans. Many made it ashore successfully on Sword, which was a big help. But the beach was heavily mined, and they faced the only major German armored counterattack of the day from the 21st Panzer Division, which caused real problems later on.
And amidst all this, we can't forget the French resistance. They were active too, weren't they? Coordinated actions.
Absolutely crucial. SOE, the British Special Operations Executive, worked with them. These coded plans, vert for railways, blue for electricity, tortue for roads, violet for phones activated by BBC Messages personnel.
Those seemingly random sentences broadcast over the radio.
Exactly. They triggered widespread sabotage. Cutting rail lines, power lines, communication cables. It significantly hampered the German ability to move reinforcements towards Normandy, a vital contribution.
So, when you pull back, D-Day is just this immense, incredibly complex event. The largest seaborne invasion ever. Almost 160,000 Allied troops landed on June 6th alone.
But at a staggering cost. Allied casualties on the day, likely over 10,000, with more than 4,400 confirmed dead. German losses are harder to pin down, maybe 4,000 to 9,000.
And despite the success in getting ashore, not all the first-day objectives were met.
No, definitely not. Key towns like Carentan, Saint-Lô, and especially Caen remained in German hands. Bayeux wasn't fully secured either. Linking up all the beachheads took time. Caen in particular became the site of protracted, bitter fighting for weeks.
So why did the Allies ultimately succeed, despite the setbacks and the fierce resistance, especially at Omaha?
Well, several key things come together. The Atlantic Wall wasn't uniformly strong. It was incomplete in places. The deception plans, bodyguard, and fortitude were incredibly successful in delaying German reinforcements, particularly the panzers.
Air superiority, too.
Absolutely critical. Allied planes ruled the skies, hindering German movement during daylight. The disruption caused by the resistance and Allied bombing crippled German logistics. And the specialized armor, the Hobart's funnies, like the DD tanks, flail tanks, bridge layers, mostly worked well, except, again, initially at Omaha.
And the German command structure issues we talked about didn't help them either.
No, the confusion and delays in committing reserves were fatal. Plus, as you hear in those German accounts, the sheer overwhelming power of the Allied assault, the non-stop bombardment, it definitely shook the defenders' morale.
Severlo and Gottel fleeing when their ammo ran out speaks volumes.
It does. And don't underestimate the impact of those scattered paratroopers. Even though they landed all over the place, they created confusion and fear behind the lines, tying up German troops who could have been reinforcing the beaches.
So, looking back on all this, it's just staggering. The scale, the planning, the bravery, the sheer terror. It's not just one story, is it? It's thousands upon thousands of individual stories colliding.
Exactly. And getting that glimpse from the German side, particularly at Omaha, it really does give you one of those aha moments. It forces you to reevaluate the standard narrative and appreciate just how close to disaster things were on that specific beach and how different it was from, say, Utah or Sword.
Yeah, and the details are fascinating too. The age of some German defenders, the success of the fake armies, the absolute reliance on a weather forecast, and these seemingly smaller things had huge consequences.
They absolutely did. It shows how history turns on these complex interactions of grand strategy, individual actions, technology, and even, well, luck and the weather. The courage shown on both sides, under unimaginable conditions, is undeniable.
It makes you want to learn more, doesn't it? About the whole Normandy campaign that followed, about what the French civilians went through, about specific unit actions. There's so much more depth there.
There really is. It's a topic you can explore endlessly. And maybe a final thought to leave you with as you reflect on this deep dive.
Go on.
Think about how those countless individual decisions and actions on that single day, a soldier choosing to advance under fire, a commander making a split-second call, a pilot dropping bombs, a resistance fighter cutting a wire, how all those small moments multiplied thousands of times over collectively shifted the entire course of the war and began the liberation of a continent. That's quite something to contemplate.